Well, good morning. Hello. My name is Jackie Anderson, and I'd like to welcome you to our weekly online learning series. Thank you for joining us in these unparalleled times. I'd like to begin by letting you know, in recognition of both the life and the tragic death of Mr. George Floyd, the University of St. Thomas will be closed and all classes canceled on Thursday and Friday, June 4th and June 5th. The purpose really is to allow our community the space on Thursday to view the online memorial if they so choose, or participate in related activities honoring or defending and demanding justice for Mr. Floyd. We know everyone is processing this experience in their own way, and we want to support our community. Speaking of community, the reason we started the weekly online learning series was to provide access to an hour of free professional development each week. So with that, we made the decision to continue with today's planned program. So today's session is a holistic look at clutter with Michele Vig. Michele is quickly becoming a local and national celebrity with her work in this area, and it will be a great session. Looking ahead to next week, mark your calendar. On Wednesday, June 10th, we have our thought leader, Doug Lennox, talking about leadership intelligence. And that's bringing together emotional intelligence and moral intelligence, a very relevant topic in these times. I hope participating in this weekly event has provided some great professional development. But if you're looking for more comprehensive development, always feel free to visit our website at the University of St. Thomas Executive Education. Now, our plan for today, I will introduce Michele Vig here in a moment, and she'll spend about 45 minutes talking about her topic related to clutter. She wants to encourage your engagement throughout the session, so feel free to use the online chat feature and direct your chats to all panelists, and we'll ask questions throughout the presentation. Now, if you're having any difficulties today or need to step out for any reason, please know the session is being recorded and the materials will be sent out early next week. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's thought leader, Michele Vig. Michele is the founder of Neat Little Nest and is certified in the KonMari decluttering method. She's a member of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. Before following this personal and professional passion, Michele has been an accomplished corporate executive for over 2 decades, holding the roles of president and chief marketing officer. Michele has been widely featured in media and has been recognized as one of Minnesota's top 50 women in business. I am delighted to welcome today's speaker, Michele Vig.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you for letting me have that few seconds, getting this technical stuff figured out. It is an absolute delight to be here. And I am so happy to spend this time with you guys this morning. With our time together, it is my hope that I can share 3 things with you. It is my goal to broaden your view on what clutter is and have you consider how it might play a role in your everyday life. I want to share with you what I believe are the 3 core components of clutter, how they are linked, and how focusing on them holistically can bring you peace. And I'm going to share some practical tips and leave time for questions for you to ask at the end. And I just want to add that small adjustment. Definitely put your questions in the chat box, but we will hold questions till the end. So with that, let's get started. So this is me in my backyard in 1979. I share this picture because it's a reminder to me of how important dreams are. Because I know exactly the dreams that were in this little girl's heart when she was standing in the back of my parents' yard to take this picture. And I bring up dreams in the context of clutter because I know that they're related. You see, your dreams are what your soul desires. And often stuff gets in the way of you reaching those dreams. I know this personally. Let me share why I started Neat Little Nest. My vision was to build a company that would help unlock people from their clutter, all types, so that they can live their most desired life. I've seen clutter get in the way of a lot of people reaching their full potential at work and at home. So I've dedicated myself to teaching people how to simplify, declutter, and organize, as well as use tools and routines to help them live their most desired life. But this didn't happen overnight, because everybody has a backstory. So let me share mine. This shows the milestones of my work path, as Jackie mentioned, so I'm not going to get into the details of what I did, but let me give you the headline. Talented executive realizes she was on the wrong path. Now, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't trade my 20-year corporate career because I know that that time is what I needed to learn and to grow. But when I started to sort through my own clutter, which for me was a lot of mental clutter, with tapes playing in my head about what I should do, rather than listening to my soul and answering the question of what I have been called to do. You see, I've been in many an executive offsite where you're asked to write down what you get lost in doing. And I always run back to decluttering and organizing. It really did seem like my superpower. And that's when it clicked for me. I had to take a different path in the back half of my career. And that is why I founded Neat Little Nest. And I founded it because clutter is bigger than stuff. You know, when most people hear the word clutter, they usually think of physical clutter, like an overflowing junk drawer or an overstuffed closet, but it's so much bigger. Let me share for you what I think it looks like. Of course, there's physical clutter. We see it all the time in our homes, in our offices, in our cars. But there's also time clutter. And if you didn't think this was real, COVID-19 was the best teacher of this lesson. When all of our time clutter went to zero because we were all forced to stay at home, for me, I even felt that my space that I had was almost overwhelming. It was too much. And finally, there's mental clutter. Those racing thoughts in your mind, those unproductive thoughts. When you put all these three together, if they become out of balance, which they can very quickly, it leads to one thing in the center, and that's chaos. I mean, it's really kind of simple. If your calendar is perpetually overbooked and your mind is consistently racing with unproductive thoughts and you can't focus, do we wonder why there might be so much physical clutter around us? I'm so passionate about this topic of holistic decluttering that I've written a book about it, and it'll come out this fall. I'm really excited because I do believe it'll start the conversation that clutter is bigger than a simple closet clean out. Because I truly believe that if people take the steps it is to clear their clutter with intention, they can achieve a deeper emotional release and a sustainable transformation that brings their soul peace. That sounds great. So where do you start? Well, I always say the same thing. I recommend you set your clutter aside for a minute and actually take time to set a vision for your life. What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? How are you being asked to grow and serve in different ways? When you take the time to look and think about what your desired life looks like, you actually begin to take the steps to make that come to life. The vision is so important because it helps you when you're going through. It helps you when you're in the murky middle. when you need to press on, when things are getting tough. This is true for any personal growth challenge, a work project, a marriage, and yes, even getting through clutter. I think it's so important that I'm going to share with all of you after this session the ability to take some time to think about your own desired life. Do a little coloring, which can always be so therapeutic, and start to write down those goals and taking some actions to get there. So you'll receive this in an email when we're finished. Let's dig into physical clutter. I'm going to show you some spaces that are real spaces of some of my clients. But I want to start by saying, although I love a beautiful space, and I believe it transforms your heart, organizing isn't the goal. It never has been for me. It's about helping people simplify their lives. So this is the bedroom of a very successful doctor. The doctor had been piling clothes on the floor that you see here for years. It might seem a little unusual, but the decade before we met, her son had died. She'd gotten divorced, and both of her parents had passed. So you're going to have to imagine for a minute this space multiplied by another 5,800 square feet. Her daughter called me for help because they were going to be asking someone new to move into their space. The mom was a little bit nervous, but she needed to see a different future. So onward we pressed. 8 days, 8 hours a day, not in a row, every week. We started to transform the space into the space you see to the right. I'm sure you can feel the difference just by looking at this slide. The words that come from my clients when we're completed with the session, words like life-changing, I can breathe, I can think. The second story, it's a little bit different than a successful doctor. It's a busy stay-at-home mom of 4. When she called me, she was completely overwhelmed and stressed out. She couldn't keep her kids, her 4 kids under 13 years old. She couldn't keep the house straight. And it was giving her a lot of mental clutter and a lot of anxiety. To me, the solution was very simple in her kitchen, but she couldn't move. So we hauled off 2 garbage bags of food, 5 huge garbage bags of products she no longer needed, and it ended up having the space look like this. Why do we have so much physical clutter? Well, there's 2 main reasons. And the first one is we buy too much. As Americans, even in a shrinking economy with COVID-19, we still buy too much. We buy because we can. There's a lot of wealth in the US. And if we don't have the wealth, we put it on credit cards. An average American has $9,000 of credit card debt. We also buy too much because marketers and advertisers, there is the power of persuasion. They want your money, and marketing works. Sometimes we buy too much because we're searching for happiness. And finally, sometimes we buy too much because we're trying to keep up with the Joneses because we're not quite clear on what our life's intent is. But if you're not buying too much, you might be keeping too much. There's a lot of people that just keep too much. Sometimes it's because of attachment. You'd be surprised at the number of research articles that show how quickly you can be attached to an object. There was a preschool study done given a child a similar toy to an exact one they had, and they knew the difference. Ask a person who gets a free koozie at a sporting event, well, used to get a free koozie at a sporting event, sometime soon, and they will tell you within minutes. If you ask them to give it back, they'll say it's theirs. And the last is real, and it's guilt. People keep too much because they feel guilty that they'll hurt someone's feelings of something that they gave them. The grip of physical clutter is real. You see, clutter can trigger your body's fight or flight response. It releases cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And if you live in an environment when you're in perpetual state of clutter, your cortisol levels stay perpetually elevated, which puts you in a state of chronic stress. But here's the problem. We're not designed for a state of chronic stress. Chronic stress has real side effects. It can lead to increased anxiety, using coping mechanisms like overeating, binge watching, television. These are all according to a Cornell study from 2016. And sad but true, and I've seen this play out time and time in my clients' homes, clutter affects men and women differently. So ladies, if you feel like clutter is affecting your mood, it is proven by science that it does. And gentlemen, if you live with a woman who is telling you that clutter is affecting her mood, trust me, my friends, it is. You do need to work on it together. And here is some great news. In addition to decluttering, which can create that physical lift, it also shows that a person's mindset can be a buffer to some of the unhealthy habits. Well, what can you do about it? I'm going to give you the quickest lesson on decluttering and organizing you've ever seen. So first, declutter by category and not by location. And let me start by saying what decluttering is versus what decluttering isn't. Decluttering is focusing on what you want to keep, and organizing is giving it a home. So when you declutter by category, which is going clothes and books and shoes, rather than location, I'm going to declutter my closet, I'm going to declutter my kitchen, I'm going to declutter my bathroom. When you declutter by category, you look at all the objects together and you're able to make decisions more quickly. When you focus on the keeps, instead of going in with a mindset that is, I need to get rid of stuff, you're actually able to move forward with what you love. Save those sentimental items for last. It's too difficult to start with things that are sentimental. You need to practice your decluttering and your ability to make decisions on what you want to keep. And the golden rule for organizing is assign a home for everything. If there are things in your home or your office that don't have a home, they will find their way to a flat surface or jammed somewhere on a cupboard. Put like things together. This isn't always as intuitive to my clients as it is to me, so I'm going to give a couple examples. In your closet, this would mean putting jeans with jeans and short sleeve shirts with short sleeve shirts, shoes all together. It would mean in your pantry that you would put snacks with snacks, and so on and so on. And finally, use labels as a wayfinding mechanism. Labels are important, not just for looks. They're actually, when you're with a family and when you have people in your space that's not just yourself, even if it is just yourself, it helps remind you where it goes. And in a group setting, it's a wayfinding mechanism for everyone to know. So that is a very simplified way with the tips of how you work on physical clutter. But physical clutter is discussed a lot, so I'm going to move on. I want to leave one thing is, if you want a free decluttering worksheet, you can find that on my website. So you can log on to neatlittlемess.com and find that. But I'm going to move on to time clutter. Because I believe, especially with those of you in professional settings, time clutter can be a real problem. This is what time clutter sounds like. There's just too much to do. I'm always behind. And I'm so busy. That's my favorite. People wear "I'm so busy" as a badge. I know. I did for 2 decades. Well, guess what? It's not a badge. The reality is that so busy comes from our inability to properly assign boundaries and poor prioritization. But here's the great news. You can teach yourself to not be in a perpetual state of busy. Because once you realize that you alone decide how you spend your time, you open up a whole new world of possibility. I once didn't think this was true. I believed if I was asked, I should do. Prioritization. Prioritization is the key to unlocking your time clutter. If you feel like you could get some help with prioritization, you're not alone. Many people talk about this. Some of the problem is societal. For over 500 years, the word wasn't priorities. It was singular. It was priority. Sometimes I think we've gotten lazy, so we just added the S on the end. So instead of us picking our priority, we pick our priorities and we make it 5 or more. So it's really important for us to evaluate everything that comes at you. Without evaluating what comes at you, it's really difficult to know what is the priority. While I don't have time to teach the matrix in detail today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about the Eisenhower Matrix. Many of you have seen this, some of you have been trained in this, but I'll briefly show you how it works. And I've been using this for quite some time. You're putting things in a quadrant. All the things that you need to do, you're assigning them a quadrant. Upper left is important and urgent. This is where many of us spend most of our time. Crisis, pressing problems. Upper right is the place where we should spend most of our time. And when we do spend most of our time, we're going to get ahead and we're going to feel more calm and productive. It's when we're planning and preparing, we're thinking, we're building relationships, and we're taking time to rest. Q3, usually other people's priorities. Not important, but urgent. Q4, not important and not urgent. This is busy work, escape activities, and procrastination. I love this matrix and I use it all the time because it helps my brain see where I should focus my time. I would encourage you to jot this down if you're not using it and take 30 seconds, 40 seconds, even just now to think about how you would fill this out. Once you've filled out the matrix, This is where the work comes in. You actually need to decide by whom and by when. I'm going to give you some questions that I ask myself when I decide how I want to move things along. Does this need to be done today? Often, the answer is no. So if you need more time, you need to ask. You need to push, and you need to consider that there's a different option other than right this second. Does it need to be done by me? Maybe someone on your team or someone in your family. I speak with parents about this all the time when I'm in their homes and we're decluttering and the mom is stressed beyond belief. I ask her, what is she doing to ensure that her children and her spouse are participating? Delegation goes much beyond the workplace. And does it need to be done at all? Funny how COVID-19 and staying at home made it very clear that there were a lot of things that did not need to be done at all. Take those lessons. Remember how you got space in your calendar. So now you've decided what you're going to do. And now you need to figure out how long. Estimating how long things will take is where most of us get into trouble. I'm not going to dig into the research on this topic, but trust me, there's a lot of it. Here's the headline. We're terrible time estimators. It's true. There are many reasons why we are terrible time estimators. Sometimes we're overconfident. I can get that done in 15 minutes. 4 hours later, it's not done. Or we don't have enough confidence. I don't think I can take that on. It's going to take me weeks. Well, guess what? We saw that also play true in COVID-19. There's no way that we could go to an online learning system. Well, my school system did in 3 days. Sometimes it's limited practice. And that is what we need to do, is practice makes progress. You need to spend time practicing estimating your time. That is the only way that you'll get better at it. It's the only way that I got better at it. By writing down what I think, how long I think things would take, and then checking back to see how long they actually would take. And I learned a lot of things about myself when I did that. I learned that when I was excited about a project, I thought it would take way less time than when I wasn't. So if you've been having a challenge with time and time management, and you've not found a planner that works for you, it might be one of the most important tools that you can use to help you tackle time clutter. I encourage you to take the time to figure that out. And let me give you some tips on how you can do that. The rule of one. I encourage you to consider not having more than one planner. So instead of having a planner for home and a planner for work and a planner for meals and a gratitude journal and a journal for this, really consider if you can have one journal, one planner, do this all for you to meet your needs. So you know where it is and you can have it with you at all times. Give it time. Try some out. Finding a planner that works for you, an analogy for the women out there, it's like finding a pair of jeans. You're going to have to try it a lot on. And you're going to have to give it some time, and test runs are important. So give it some time and let it work. Once you have found a planner you love, or even think you love, it's working pretty well. Establish routines so that you use it consistently for many weeks in a row. And see how you can have that discipline of writing things down, checking things off, and checking back to have you move forward and create some space in your calendar. The key is simplification and finding one that works for you. we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about mental clutter. I love this quote from Swami. A focused mind is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. I believe this with all of my heart because it is the one tool we have that can drive our day for the better and sometimes take us down. So let's look at the types of mind clutter. We got a rushing mind, negative Nelly, and decision fatigue. These are not, I am one type. This is not like Enneagrams or like Strengths Finders. Mind clutter, everyone has probably used all of these. They've all shown up. So a rushing mind is when you're trying to focus on things and your mind gets off track and you get completely distracted and you really don't even know what you were working on. Or your ideas are just bouncing from one idea to the next. Negative Nelly, it is what it sounds like. Bad ideas grab our attention and they stick in our memories much more than positive ones. But sometimes they can create this negative loop in our minds. And we get more negative and more negative. Psychologists refer to this as negativity bias. And that's our tendency to grab onto those negative ideas and not let them go. And the final one is decision fatigue. Decision fatigue depletes your mental energy, and that can lead to a lot of mind clutter. So let's look at some tips on how to combat those different types of mind clutter. With a rushing mind, do one thing at a time. I spoke about this a lot in my time in my corporate career. Your brain can't actually multitask. It's actually just switching attention over and over. It's called attention switching. When you do this attention switching a lot, it becomes less productive over time and it wears out your brain. So if you think about single tasking, which is doing one thing at a time, focusing your mind and your body on one task at a time, you're able to accomplish more over time than trying to multitask. The reason why it's difficult to single task than it is to multitask is you're working against your brain's natural desire. Your prefrontal cortex is the place that you need to work on in order to get the single tasking figured out. Yet it's the exact same place that gets distracted easily. So it takes time, and we'll talk about some of those mindfulness tips in order for you to practice so you can get some of that clutter out of your mind so you can focus. If you can't do, also doing one thing at a time, if you just can't quite seem to get it, turn things off. If your mind clutter is rushing so much, just get to a space of quiet. Turn off the electronics, the TV. Sometimes you just need to stop it all and be in the silence in order to stop that rushing mind. Also, you need to consider doing less. Sometimes we're just booked to every single minute of our day and we need to take some things off and just remove and give ourselves some space. And the last is deep breathing exercises. They really can help when your mind is rushing. Just spending time with a deep inhale and a deep exhale is enough to start to change the way that your brain is processing those thoughts. Some of the tips on negative Nelly is to find your inner, your compassionate voice. A compassionate voice sounds like what you would say to your friend. So instead of you saying, You're not doing this right. Why can't you figure this out? Those are words we use when we talk to ourselves, but we would never talk that way to our friends. It's okay, you would say. You can do this. Give yourself some space. When you find your compassionate voice, your innermost compassionate voice, that is what you need to help turn around negative Nelly mental clutter. The second is to be quick to forgive. Science proves that when you hold on to resentment, it is difficult for your mind to release. So when you're quick to forgive, it can have significant health benefits, including reduced anxiety and depression. And like always, taking the time for those breathing exercises is important. This last one is a really big change for me personally, was to celebrate more. Because when you celebrate more, you tend to create lasting memories in your mind. So when you're going down these negative Nelly paths of mental clutter, but you start to celebrate more, you're able to pull up those positive memories more quickly and pull you out of those negative Nelly thoughts. And it really can give you a mental boost. A lot of people in corporate understand decision fatigue. Some of the tips to combat decision fatigue are take a break. Literally stop. Set limits. There are so many ways to set limits. One is you can set a timer. And just as much time as you have is what you're going to have in order to get something done. Another option for setting limits is actually just deciding how many opportunities you're going to look at. So instead of exhausting every opportunity, you're going to say, I'm going to look at 3 choices, and then I'm going to decide. You can also eliminate choice. There are some ways that I've seen people do this successfully in my career. One of them is to choose a work uniform. It's a lot easier when we're all working from home to probably realize in this time of COVID-19 how much less important, considering everything we have on at every minute. If we could just simplify the way that we're getting dressed, it really can have an impact on making a lot of decisions. It can also have an impact on how much time you're spending. Some other ways you can eliminate choice. You could consider eating the same thing every day of the week. So what I mean by that is, as families, as parents, as single people who are creating meal plans for the week and trying to figure out what you eat, maybe it's actually just as simple as saying meatless Monday, Taco Tuesday, and Pizza Friday forever, and getting every day of the week sort of set up. Once you have that structure, it becomes less decisions you need to make over time. And you can delegate decisions. If you don't feel like making it, then delegate it. If you don't want to pick what you're going to do, if you don't want to pick the movie, then let someone else choose. If you don't want to spend time doing all these other things, ask someone else to make the choices for you. And last but certainly not least, with mind clutter, mindfulness is the key to changing and turning things around. Spending time working on your mindfulness helps decrease your mental clutter significantly. And here are just some of the ways that you can consider getting rid of some of that mental clutter just because of your mindfulness. Find a mantra. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be the best mantra. Mine, for the most part, is the word focus. When I'm off track, I just say focus. And it helps me center my mind. If you haven't tried it, try keeping a journal. Think about getting your thoughts out on paper. Often we just need to get things out of our heads and onto paper so we can release it and stop the mental swirl. If you add a gratitude to that part of that journal, it's even twice as good. Meditate. I know for some people this can be a very intimidating thought, is to try to meditate in a way that they've never tried before. And so they get nervous to do it. But I encourage you, there's so many apps out there that you can use to just try it. The one that I am adoring at the moment, it's the Calm app. I've also used Headspace. But they're really, really easy ways for you to start to practice something that can help you calm your mind. The next is to expand your tribe. Sometimes the reality is you're just hanging out with the wrong people. You do become the people you hang out with. So if there's a lot of negative influence on you, you might need to find more positive influences in your life. If you're around overly negative or overly critical people all the time, it might not be the best thing for your mental clutter. Find people who can help build you up, lift you up, and share your strengths. And last but certainly not least, if you need it, get help. That could be a therapist, that could be a decluttering expert, that could be a cleaning lady, or a mentor and a coach. All of these ways will help you if you're challenged with any of these types of clutter. Find someone who can help you get through it, just like you would any other challenge that you're having in your life. Before I open it up to questions, I want to leave you with this, one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite people. Your life isn't about a big break. It's about taking one significant, life-transforming step at a time. This is true in all that we do, and especially in the topic of these 3 areas of clutter.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a great presentation. 2 things that really stuck with me was your opening quote around simplifying your life. It's not about organizing, it's about simplifying your life. And last week we actually had a session on mindfulness, and you hit on the same key point of it's not about time, it's about attention. So thank you for your presentation. We do have quite a few questions, so let me jump right in. The first one is, how do you work with a spouse or relative that seems to have attachments to everything?
Yes. Thank you for asking this, whoever did. What I always say about this, and it's going to come across, I hope it comes across in the way that it's intended. Really look at yourself first. So a lot of times I hear from my clients, there's a lot of this going on. It's their fault, it's their fault. They have attachments, they have attachments. Everybody has attachments. So start with yourself, start decluttering your own things, start looking at what you want to keep, because decluttering is contagious. And if you really believe that, and you're sharing with your partner, that you want them to really make a change in the space, make sure that you've looked at yourself first. I'll tell you with complete transparency, I am the messiest. I'm the one in my house, other than my 2 children, that might leave the most clutter. When I really went to examine it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's me. But it's because when we get upset that we sort of like to say that it's someone else's. But if it really is truly a challenge with that person, have the conversation, but always start with yourself.
Great, thank you for that. The next question. Advice for Workspace. Now, my home office, I have a lot of virtual clutter and regular clutter. I tend to save a lot because I think it may be useful or relevant someday. How can I best organize my home office space and identify those things that I need to keep for the long term?
That's a great question. Often someday doesn't come. That is part of the reality. So a couple things for the home office. If you have a lot of paper clutter, really ask yourself, do you really believe that you'll need it in the future? And if you do, you really can consider scanning those items to have less paper clutter and have it get that clutter off physical space and go digitized. So that's what I would say for some of that paper clutter in the home. The other paper clutter in the home that I see a lot with my clients is actually not making a real decision and kind of putting it in this land of, I might need it. The most likely scenario, if you really, really need it and you threw it out, because we're living in this digital age, what I share with my clients is, what do you actually do though when you need to fix something in your home or you need to do something at work? Ask yourself what your real behaviors are. Because if your real behavior is to go to your phone to look to find it, then you know that you don't need the paper. Because if you really go to your phone when your computer's broken or your softener's broken, you don't need the paper because you're not going to use it anyway. So really ask yourself what you do, because especially those of us who are on both sides of the digital divide, like myself. I lived in paper and now I'm in the digital world. We have to make more transition because we didn't, our children, they think they don't have this paper issue that we do because they don't have the same challenges. So really ask yourself what you're needing it for. And I should say the philosophy that I tell my clients when dealing with paper clutter, it's more of a shocker than anything, is I want you to go in with a mindset that you're going to get rid of 100% of it. Because if you go in with a mindset that you're going to get rid of 100% of your paper clutter, your mind will tell you what you actually need.
Thank you. And there's a whole bunch of questions coming in the same area. So I'm going to just give you two other spins on it in case there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah.
Can you give some advice about family heirlooms, especially when we reach that time in our lives that we're losing loved ones? And then also on another question, how do we recommend adult children who have the attachments to the home, the items, they have their own families and homes now, how to work through that? I don't know if there's anything else you'd add.
Yes, I want to talk about the second one first, which is the adult children. For all the parents listening, your home is not the place for your children's mementos. It is your responsibility to get those mementos to those children, period. A lot of times parents feel this guilt and they're just, no. When your children move out, so do their things. That's one. The second one with family heirlooms, this is a really important topic because there is a division that I see with newer, how do I say it? So I'll use my mom and I as an example. My generation and the generations that are younger are not looking for our parents' things. We're not looking for our parents' we're telling our parents, Mom, I don't want all this stuff. And that generation, they don't understand, but you should want this stuff. So here's what I'm asking. And I've had this conversation with my mom, and so I know what it's like to have the conversation. Parents, if your children are saying they don't want it, please listen to them. Don't try to tell them that they don't understand and that they don't know. This is what I hear parents doing all the time. My clients do this to their kids, but they should want this. If they don't, then you have to decide if you want it. And don't put that burden upon them, making them make a decision that you're unwilling to make. They don't want it, then they don't want it. And have the conversations early. I encourage people to have the conversations before it's too late. My husband's mother passed very suddenly, and his brother. They passed within 2 weeks of each other. There was a lot going on in our family. And let me tell you, in the months that followed, I had a lot of tough conversations with my mom. I had them now. I wanted to go through my things with my mom while she was alive and my dad was alive. So it can be a little bit emotional because we're talking about things that can be scary and talking about end of life. But let me tell you, I've done it both ways. I've been struck by a sudden deaths of two very important people in my life and had to sort through their things. And it is really, really hard. And I've had the conversations with my mom in the early stages. And it was really, really great because I've heard a lot of stories and I've learned more about my parents in the last few years because of them. So I encourage you to get the courage to do it.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions asking for recommendations. So I'm going to give you two categories. Do you have journals or journal apps for managing self that you might recommend? And on that same note, can you please repeat the mindfulness sites that you recommend?
Yes, I'll start with the last first. The mindfulness apps that I absolutely love are the Calm app and Headspace. They're a little bit different. Headspace you can try out. I think I did Headspace, the free 10 sessions, because you can keep repeating them. This was years ago. I think I did those 10 free sessions like 10 times. So 100 times, 10 times 10. But you can try it. And I now use the Calm app. The difference is the Calm app is a little bit broader. There's a lot more branches you can sort of test and try. So I'm really enjoying that right now. Those are my top two. And Jackie, remind me of the first question.
Journals or journal apps?
Yes. So I am a huge fan. What I have learned over the course of my searching for journals is I really have enjoyed a bullet journal. A bullet journal is a way that you are able to create this journal for yourself based on what you need. That took me a lot of experimenting to figure that out. What I have realized since is that a lot of people don't like that free-flowing creativity. And because of it, I actually created my own basically bullet journal that you can fill out. And it's available on my website. I'm not trying to sell this. I'm more suggesting there isn't one perfect way. My point about finding the perfect planner is you have to try some out. Some people are very tactile and they need to feel it. I'm that person. So this is my journal. It's very tactile. It is a mix of handwritten stuff, my own handwriting, and then this is that thing I showed you. So it's a mix of that. Some people are not that way at all, and they want to go completely digital. They're going to have to try that. So for me, there is no silver bullet to finding a planner. It really is about trying different things. And I would say the big question at the beginning is, are you tactile? And you're going to know this. Or are you digital? And practicing both. I had a person who said, I am digital, I am digital, I am digital. I said, great, then what's kind of the struggle? And we worked through it, and he said at the end, he's like, I think I'm not digital. And he ended up needing to find a planner, and that was one he could write down on.
Great, thank you. All right, I have quite a few more questions. I'm going to try to get in one or two more, if that's all right. Yeah. But I did get a comment. Insight Timer is also a great meditation app, so I will just put that out there. From Annie, do you have organizations that you would recommend donating to? Clothing, household goods, furniture, etc. Yes.
Go onto my blog. I have a blog a few blogs back, but I update it every year. For Minnesotans, it's national, but there's a blog that has over 50, I don't even know, it might be over 60 now, but different ways, digital ways you can send in, places in the Twin Cities. So if you can find that blog post, and then you can have all the links to all those places.
Great. And then I'm going to combine these last two, and we will wrap up so people have time to get to their next meeting. My home is cluttered, and I'm completely overwhelmed. What should I do first? And similarly, my to-do list is a mess, and it's got my head spinning. What is one practical thing I can do? So those two kind of put together.
On decluttering your home, I would say the place to start, go to my website, download get the free checklist, and go category by category. It'll start you with clothes, then books, then papers. That's what I would do for decluttering your space. If your time is what is your biggest challenge, First, I honestly would take a breath. I would take a walk. I would just get in your space. My first thing is always a brain dump. Write it all down, get it out of your head. So don't try to go to the matrix right away. Just write it down, get everything written down. Once you have things written down, you're already going to feel that release because it's going to get out of your head and onto paper. Once you have those things on your paper, then start to prioritize it and really just start chopping that list down.
Great. Well, with that, we are at our time. I want to thank Michele Vig for joining us. It was a great presentation. And I want to remind everyone, we'll be sending out the video link next week, as well as the handout that Michele referenced. And there were questions about your services and things like that, Michele, that, again, if you go to our website, you should be able to see some of those details. Our next session is next Wednesday, June 10th, with Doug Lennox, talking about leadership intelligence. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope that you are well, you are safe, and be kind. I hope to see you next week. Thank you from the University of St. Thomas.